Hello, welcome to another PlayBASIC blog entry. Just wanted to give a bit of an update what's going on with 1.65B. So we're working on PlayBASIC 1.65 and it's the second revision, trying to get that to a retail build. We released the beta the other day. Just flip back to the forum for a second. The latest beta public one is it's 21 or something like that. Yeah, 21. So obviously you need to log in to download those files. What this version does is it actually moves the vast majority of the command sets from executing on the old VM side and the new VM side. So there's two sides to execution. There's old VM and new VM, which is the virtual machine. So the way it used to be was, out of the 20 command sets or wherever there are, there would be, I think the first version there's probably something like say 17 or 18 command sets out of 20, and the rest are done on the new VM, and then as each beta's gone through, this ratio has got better. And the new VM is faster. That's what we're doing. It's smaller and it's much more generic than what the old versions are. In fact, it's pretty much completely generic. So the current build is about, I think it's only one command set that is running, that needs to run on the old VM side, and all the rest have moved across, which is great. And what I wasn't counting on really was what that command set does. It's actually the debugger hooks. So in the old VM, we've got this idea where kind of the runtime, or as your code is built, so you've got this your code is actually looks a lot more. It's kind of like a simplified machine language is what it's built into, and so expression like A equals B plus C and D or whatever. There's an add instruction, and you would have this kind of expression to represent it. Very simple. So when a multiply is done, there's a mul instruction. For those people who've done assembly, you'll know where I'm coming from. All these things they're generally 3 operands. Anyway, so the VM has its own instruction set like this, and to talk to the debugger, there are these debug hooks that are inserted into your code depending on what compile mode you hit. Like normally, if you just hit F5, for example, F4 is for building the final executable if you've got the retail version, but in run you've got debug modes, and the debug mode F7 is a very light mode. It actually just does, it lets the debugger run, but you don't have tracing in it. And to do tracing, you need to actually insert these special opcodes pretty much every line or every few instructions, so you can step between each line of code or what operations are happening. Some code you write produces no code at all. Having a type declaration, for example, that doesn't make any code. My vector, XYZ. I really don't like this keyboard. This is not my normal computer that I use on a daily basis. I never write anything on this thing. It's really just out here to view the internet quickly. But my point is that this remaining instruction set up here on the VM1 side, the way it's attached, the way it's actually implemented, it's not practical to move across to the new VM2. So we're going to have to leave it there for the time being. Yeah, it's just a pain. It's a pain, big pain in the butt, to be honest. I was kind of hoping we'd get pretty much 99.99% of all the instruction set running on the new VM side, and we would be free of this here, free of the old sort of bindings really, but we're not. So this kind of brings back the old topic of you know, what to do with the debugger. The debugger is really just a state monitor. I don't normally like running examples in these videos because the recording software drops audio sync, but I just have sync wait key, for example. Run the debugger, run with debugging. Geez, Windows 10 slow. Unbelievable. So the program's running. You can look at what variables are available. There are no variables in the program. There's no console output from the program, and the state of the command sets. These are generally built into the debugger, and of course, if our future is to have a debugger that doesn't have any direct connections to the command sets internally, then we can't do this. Yeah, which is why the two things are actually built in together. What we need to do really, there's a few other things you can do up under the file. Thing like you can get a memory usage. Oh, something I never noticed before. It drops a memory usage state of the whole program to the console here. So you can see how much memory the screen's taking up, what your command sets are chewing up, what things exist in each command set. There's one font, for example, showing video memory usage or system memory usage all the way through, with some weird bug there as well, obviously in this build. Just the way it is. Yeah. These are actually for if you want the runtime to allow types to be automatically allocated when you write to fields or that don't exist, which is a topic for another day. So the problem with the debugger is that it's highly connected to how the old VM works and how the old command set works. So I can't just kind of chop it out, bring it across, and because the whole point is that the new VM doesn't have any idea of what's inside the language. It doesn't know. It doesn't need to know. I sort of wrote some copy about this a while ago. Looking back, and it was back in 2015 in the old blogs. They're in the developers maintenance area, by the way. And if you go back even further, you'll find more and more conversation about this, wanting to basically get rid of the debugger as it stands. I think here I'm actually talking about a syntax highlight view, so you can have some hovering and actually view values inside variables, which is much more akin to what people are used to with things like Visual Basic, for example, which is all cool. The question is how to do that. Well, the highlighting stuff is actually not that difficult, and working out a way to come up with getting data in or out of the runtime is a bit of a challenge, but it's possible. Excuse me. The difficulty would be, I like the idea of being able to view the state of things from the debugger side, but the debugger can't be allowed to know anything about what's in it. So I'm not too sure how it's going to work at the moment into the future. I'm not necessarily talking about 1.65B here or even C, but at some point, probably in the next few sort of revisions, we're going to have to move this thing, separate the two things apart. I love the idea of building a debugger that's actually in PB. You can send messages between the runtime and the debugger. It doesn't matter if they're actually not running at the same speed. At the moment they're running a single thread. That would mean the debug thread and the application could be running together. One idea I was having was that you could have kind of a message, a sort of client slave. You'd have this, the runtime is here and it's calling when you run in debug mode. Either there's instructions inside your application to load the debugger, set it up, and then register certain entry points in whatever command sets you're using with the debugger. And on this side of the equation, the debugger itself could have kind of like a query mechanism where this registration here would give some sort of get and set functionality. I don't mean for properties, I just mean just a couple of functions where you might have a function called get, and you would pass it some message, Inside the message, it's phrasing out the text instructions to get, you might say you want to get, the array pointer of this thing. You want to get the structure size or something like that. Or the quantity. The number of things in this structure, or even just something simple like, give me the name of this data. Library name or something. Pretty sort of off the cuff. See, on the debugger side, you could just run through, query these things here, and then build simple visual aids to sort of let you see what the information is. And if the debugger is built in PB, this means that I don't have to maintain it. In fact, you could take the open source debugger and then customize it to your any whims, and it would work. Well, in theory, it should work for everyone. And even sort of, you could take some of your library code, for example, and what I mean by library code too is, let's say you've written a bunch of functions. You might use PB to DLL to translate that to machine language, and then they just become just like any other function call inside PB. They are just straight machine language function calls. Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is that the debugger itself could have like a message port. Yeah. Possibly some script to drive it. So I'm not quite sure where that would be, whether it's passed to the debugger application here, or it's passed through by code. In other words, when you're in debug mode, the your bytecode, your program actually has a whole new header attached to it, which loads the debugger, does these setup required, and possibly has some of the scripts provided. And it might be really simple. I'm not talking about having like basic like language or anything like that. Nothing even remotely complicated. Just very simple things about that GUI could actually just use those as straight queries and run through and goes, oh, okay, this library has a name, and I can pull it out of here, or I can get the pointer to certain structures from here, or I can get a copy of, let's say you might have a query here to get, I'll say, get array object, might have 50 or something like that. So imagine we're sort of querying the sprite library, for example, and might return a string that's kind of laid out for us. It might have just a piece of text where it's got like the X position, 1,000. Not really going to work like that, is it? It's kind of got this, the structure is laid out here for us. The Y is 100 or whatever. What image does it use? So the libraries themselves can actually have bits of debug code in them for letting the debugger look at information inside them. If the library doesn't have that information, the debugger doesn't die. The user doesn't care about that. So, I mean, a lot of that stuff you can kind of build in yourself. Really, you can, I think in another version, there might be a function out there somewhere on the forum that where I've got like a get sprite properties. It runs through and just builds builds this kind of text view of whatever, or its property, where it's the field name or the member name, whatever you want to call it, the data name, and then the value of that data. Because I was using it to, or if you're using it for something, what was that for? I can't think of it now. It might be still on the forum. Yeah, getting a bit sidetracked. Always getting a bit sidetracked. Oh, I wouldn't have a clue. I can't think of what it is. But I mean, anyway, so the theory would be to have the debugger as a separate executable, or maybe it's a plug-in DLL that can be loaded. That DLL is built with PB to DLL. That takes the onus. It takes the onus of, you don't need to be a C programmer to write extensions. You don't need to, which is where a lot of these projects fail, because they pretty much need, if you don't know C, C++, you can't extend them, and it falls down to the developer to do everything for everyone else, and how people want stuff to work is often very different. I notice the idea is about the debug stuff is kind of a bit weird. So this would be the VM side. So the VM is probably launching the two. Maybe it's when it loads the debugger here, it's making sure they've got a handshake, they've got some way of passing data to each other. And if the VM actually crashes, the debugger should still be running, so you shouldn't lose any data you've dropped into the console. Older versions of PV actually had a different version of the console altogether. When you use print, for example, those statements there only get executed when you're running in any debug mode. But they used to also drop that to disk. Yeah, which I guess, you know, I guess it would be nice to have some sort of debugger controls for those command sets, but I can think of a lot of things I actually want to change with those, but getting a bit out there. So anyway, the problem we're having at the moment is the dependencies that are in 1.65B and concerning the debugger are causing some things not to work, particularly in the way, particularly the debugger itself. It's being a bit problematic. I'll keep working on that, and hopefully we'll get a retail build of 1.65 with a debugger working in some state. Look, it may not work perfectly, or it does. I mean, it's not perfect anyway, but it may not work as it worked prior. But as long as it kind of works most of the time, that's about where we are. We might have to put out another beta to let people test it before we sort of go building that revision. I guess it doesn't matter too much because I'm going to start work on 1.65C pretty much straight away anyway, which is how things normally progress. If you've got any good ideas about the communication between the debugging stuff, or what kind of weird stuff that might be useful at runtime, I always actually thought it would be neat to have kind of attribute this kind of query style thing here internally. So you could just have a function. You couldn't call it get; it's too generic. But you might have, in the sprite command, you might actually have, we'll use the same naming convention, get sprite info or something. So you have the sprite index here, and maybe a flags thing here or something like that, or mode flags, maybe a mode or something like that, and it will return this kind of text structure here. And the reason why that's useful is if you want to display this information yourself, then it's very problematic to run through and grab all this data here, yada yada yada. If you had a piece of text that came back, maybe it's a little not as pretty as this thing here, but maybe it has the fields or offsets pre-phrased for you. So you might have X position is this, like that, but you might also have a character or 2 digits up front that are the offsets of the next field, or maybe 4 digits or something like that. So they're the length of this field. Possibly even just a mode here or something like that. The reason for that is you don't really want to be, I don't want to force people to run through and pick out bits of code do sort of text phrasing themselves. Just be able to go, okay, grab this thing here from there, that'll do. Then you could do your own display mechanism yourself. Don't know. I've sort of had that idea for a while, like a lot of things really. Anyway, I'll go and do something constructive, and hopefully you guys can mess around and have a bit of fun. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.